The National Hot Rod Association presents Championship Drag Racing on ESPN Speed World. The NHRA, the world's largest motorsport sanctioning body, showcasing speeds in excess of 290 miles an hour and traveling the quarter mile in less than 5 seconds. Championship Drag Racing from the NHRA. Millions of drag racing fans across the country have been thrilled by the action in the first 13 events in the $18 million Winston drag racing season. The last stop was in the Great Northwest at Seattle International Raceway and the third annual Jolly Rancher Candies Northwest Nationals. For the second event in a row, defending Winston Top Fuel champion Gary Ormsby took the Top Fuel title. His victim at Seattle in a rematch of the Grand Nationals at Sanair, Canada, was Chris Karamazini's. Ormsby ran a 5.09 second elapsed time to Karamazini's engine exploding 5:51. Karamazini's destroyed the motor in attempting to defeat Ormsby, but emerged unhurt. In winning at Seattle, Ormsby extended his Winston points lead over Joe Amato to over 700 points. A driver earns 200 points for every round victory in eliminations. In Funny Car Eliminator, the Candies and Hughes car driven by Mark Oswald lived up to expectations as he met Ed McCulloch in the final round for the third time this season. Oswald used the power of his Ford Probe to overcome the slight starting line advantage gained by McCulloch. The times, Oswald ran a 5:40 to McCulloch's 5:49. Ed McCulloch's runner-up finish at Seattle gained him 200 points on the leader John Force, who went out in the final four. Mark Oswald moved into fourth with his second win this season. If you're a Ford fan, then you had plenty to cheer about in Seattle as Bob Glidden regained the winner's circle for the first time since the Arizona Nationals in February of this year. In the Pro Stock Finals, Mark Powick had the starting line advantage, but the power of Glidden's probe was simply too much for the 32-year-old Buckeye. Glidden ran a 7:38 to Powick's 7:43. With this win, Glidden vaulted to the third position in the point standings and proves that he's not out of the running for his 11th Winston Championship.
From the Great Northwest, the NHRA Drag Racing Trail now moves to the Northwoods country of central Minnesota. And race number 14, the 9th annual Quaker State North Star Nationals at Brainerd International Raceway. You're looking at a picture of the skies over Brainerd International Raceway, and truthfully, this is the way it has looked the entire weekend. Hello, everybody. I'm Dave McClelland, and welcome to the Brainerd Lakes region of Minnesota, where it has been rather gloomy. These cloudy skies have prevailed, and they brought with it a gloomy atmosphere for some of our low qualifiers. In fact, the number one qualifier in Pro Stock, Darrell Alderman, lost his first-round race to Lee Dean due to mechanical problems. This after setting a new track record at 7.34 seconds during qualifying. Alderman was not the only one to experience problems. The number one car in Funny Car Eliminator had his share also. For that story, let's go to my good friend, Steve Evans.
David, we're looking at a man who has had very little sleep. John Force's crew chief, Austin Coyle. You'll recall we told you in Seattle that the Winston points leader was having supercharger problems. Well, they continued here at Brainerd. Even though yesterday in the first session of qualifying he grabbed the number one spot, he blew a supercharger up again, and the crew said, hey, this has got to stop. They came back to the trailer, and they changed the entire engine combination, trying to get more fuel out of the engine at the far end of the racetrack. To say that that new combination didn't work would be a gross understatement. You're looking at the remains of a horrific Funny Car fire. The car left the starting line harder than it ever had, its best ever 60-foot time.
smoked the tires real big, and I just leaned on it too hard. Probably driver error there. I should have got out of it. And it was up, and it just went up, and it banged so quick. And I didn't think it lit at first, and then I was on the brakes, and didn't get no burns, only got hurt. I just finally ran out of time. I had to get out the window. Hey, the fans got their money's worth, huh? It's just an old bulldog fight's what it is, and we got bulldogged.
Fortunately, when these blower problems first started to occur, John Force added a spare body to his parts inventory, something they don't usually carry. And it's a good thing, because with all-night labor on the part of the crew, they were able to get back into action instead of being on the sideline, losing more and more points as the rounds went by. As it was earlier today in round number 1, it was Force victorious at 5:41 over Whit Bazemore, and no blower problems.
We'll be seeing John Force in action in round number 2 coming up just a little bit later here at Brainerd. But right now it is second round Top Fuel Eliminator, and this is Kenny Bernstein. You're riding along with the Budweiser King as he goes through his burnout procedures. Alongside of him, Frank Bradley at the wheel of the Easy Wider Special. Here are 2 drivers in search of a win. Bradley's last victory came a year ago at the California Nationals. He qualified here in the number 2 spot at a 5:04 and beat rookie Maurice DuPont in round 1. Kenny Bernstein, since he switched to Top Fuel Eliminator, has yet to win an event. He qualified 7th at a 5:12. Mike Brotherton fell to Bernstein in the first round. Kenny did come close, though. Remember, he finished runner-up at Denver and the Mile High Nationals. Crew Chief Dale Armstrong sprints back behind the Top Fuel dragsters to watch as Bradley and Bernstein square off here in round number 2 of the North Star Nationals. Oh, what a ride! Both cars having engine problems, but it's Bradley there first, a 5:02. Bernstein's chute just a little bit late, but he's got the second one out and is slowing safely. The speed for Bradley, 280 miles an hour. That speed earned for Frank the low ET of the meet. His elapsed time was identical to the qualifying time of Joe Amato, but the higher speed on this run earned Bradley the low elapsed time of the meet thus far. As we see here in replay, Bernstein's engine problems allowed Bradley to march on by. The 1990 NHRA Quaker State North Star Nationals is being brought to you by Quaker State. The Big Q is one tough motor oil. And by Ford and your Ford dealer. Have you driven a Ford lately? And by Budweiser, Beechwood aged for that clean, crisp taste. This Bud's for you. More Top Fuel action from Brainerd coming up next. We're back at Brainerd International Raceway in John Force's pit area, and John giving us an A-OK sign. And that's truly a wonder, because yesterday nobody would have given him a chance to be here in round number 2 of eliminations, which we'll be seeing just a little bit later. Right now, we're continuing with Top Fuel Eliminator, and this is Frank Hawley at the wheel of Darrell Gwynn's Coors Extra Gold Special. Since he took over the driving chores in this car, Frank Hawley has won a single event, and that was his debut performance at the Spring Nationals earlier this year. Here he is matched against the new track record holder and the low qualifier for this North Star Nationals, Joe Amato, the defending champion. While the weather's been cold and damp, it didn't slow down Amato in qualifying. He had a 5:02, a track record, beat Don Prudhomme in his first round race. Frank Hawley, meantime, qualified 8th at a 5:14, beat Eddie Hill in his first round encounter. As these two cars pull to the starting line, the skies are spritzing. It's like trying to walk through a thick cloud. You come off with moisture on your face. They get it on the windscreen. It does not affect the performance, and it is not an unsafe condition as Amato and Hawley lead the line. Amato pulls it out. His elapsed time, a new track record. 5.01 seconds, the quickest time ever here at Brainerd at 268 miles an hour. As we look again, Frank Hawley in the far lane got a very slight advantage off the starting line. He was actually ahead for the first couple of 100 feet. Then Amato thundered through with that brilliant 5:01. Remember, in the Winston Points Chase, if you end up the event with low elapsed time of the meet, you earn yourself a very valuable 50 points, and that's got to be on Amato's mind. He's currently number 2 to Gary Ormsby, the points leader. And this is Gary Ormsby. 4,000 horsepower, doing the burnout in his Castrol Special. Ormsby has got to be thinking about low ET. Let's go to Steve.
Well, Joe, you heard Frank Bradley's time. You knew you'd lost those 50 Winston points. You got them back with a 5:01.
Well, Steve, it's almost raining here, and, it's a tough round. Holly's car always runs good, Darrell's car. And we got to get that round under our belt to get a shot at the championship and Mr. G.O.
You feel a little mist in the air. Doesn't it worry you that the track might not hold the power?
Well, they had to wipe the windshield and my helmet off before we actually staged the car. So
amazing racetrack.
It's amazing. It's got a lot of teeth in it. The cloud cover's helping, but it's fast out there.
See you this summer.
Thank you.
Steve, while Joe Amato is obviously encouraged about the racetrack, so is the man backing up under the direction of his crew chief, Lee Beard. We're talking, of course, about Gary Ormsby, the reigning Winston champ and the guy that is leading the points chase. His competition in the Jolly Rancher Candy Special is Lori Johns. She qualified 5th with a 5:10 and beat Shirley Muldowney in the first round, while Ormsby qualified in the number 4 spot at a 5:07, and he defeated Kenny Koretsky in his round 1 matchup. That 5:01 by Joe Amato just a few moments ago has passed the word down the line of these top fuel dragsters. This racetrack can take all you can give it. It was just 2 weeks ago at Seattle that both Ormsby and Amato were in the 4s. Now Ormsby's got to contend with Lori Johns, who leaves too soon in red light. Disqualifying herself at the start, the win automatically was Ormsby's at the starting line, but he thundered through to a 5:04, 281 miles an hour, just a couple of hundredths of a second slower than the record pace by Amato. Watch that far lane. There's the red light in replay as Lori Johns attempted to get an advantage at the start, but left too soon, beating herself. Our last pair of cars here in round number 2 matches the Miller High Life Special, driven by Dick LaHaye, against Gene Snow, who just happens to be the chairman of the board of Brainerd International Raceway. I just wonder if he thinks that's going to count for much when he comes up to that starting line against Dick LaHaye. I really don't think it will. Both drivers backing into position after their long, smoky burnouts. Now, let's go to Steve.
Well, I'm sure Gary Ormsby will be anxious to hear his elapsed time. He knows he races Joe Amato in the next round. He'd like to have lane choice on his side, but unfortunately, Gary, you will not. A 5:04.
5:04. Yeah, it shook a little bit up here, Steve, on a big end. I don't know why.
It ran real fast. Maybe that's why. 281.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. It left good and everything, but it just shook real bad up on the top end. So we don't have lane choice. I don't think it's that big a factor. Everybody says that, right?
That's right. Gary Ormsby, great attitude as always.
Well, the lane choice is determined by who has the quicker elapsed time of the previous round, and you had the chance there to see them both back-to-back, Amato and Ormsby. They'll be racing each other in the final 4. Joe gets to pick the lane. Out in front of Dick LaHaye's dragster is his daughter, Kim. She's the crew chief. She tuned that car to a 5:04, the number 3 qualifying spot. He beat Tommy Johnson in round 1, while Gene Snow ran a 5:10 to qualify 6th. His first round opponent was Jim Head. LaHaye has got to be bolstered by his performances in both the first round and in qualifying. After a bit of a lackluster early start, he made some changes following the race at Sears Point, and they have definitely pointed him in the right direction performance-wise. Both drivers staging quite carefully. Snow off with the wheels in the air. Again, he puts the wheels up, and yet he won't back out of it. Dick LaHaye wins the race. His time of 5:06 at 277. Snow had a giant advantage at the starting line and never gave up down the racetrack. He still ran a 5:25. As we watch again, Snow in the far lane, already a few hundred feet off the racetrack, smokes the tires with the front wheels in the air, gets a bit sideways, gets it back, gathers it in, and tries to catch up with Dick LaHaye, but cannot do it. So the final 4 looks this way. Dick LaHaye races Frank Bradley, with Bradley and the quicker elapsed time getting the lane choice. The other pair is that classic struggle between the Winston points leader, Gary Ormsby, and the guy chasing him, Joe Amato.
As moist as the air is, there's even a little bit of drizzle in the air. Doesn't it surprise you the racetrack still holds these cars?
Well, it's cool, and and a lot of times when it's cool like that, the track stays firm and has very good traction, and that's what we're hoping for, that it just stays like this for the rest of the day.
I'll tell you, it's getting so cool it may freeze.
Well, Steve, stay warm because we've got lots of racing yet to do today here at the Quaker State North Star Nationals. A huge crowd bundled up against the chilly weather is on hand here at Brainerd International Raceway, and they're ready for some hot racing in round number 2 of Funny Car Eliminator. Here's the pride of Minnesota, Tom Hoover, at the wheel of the Showtime Pontiac Grand Prix. He is racing the man that holds low elapsed time of the meet. He set it in round number 1. Ed McCulloch at the wheel of the Miller High Life Oldsmobile. He ran 5.282. An incredible performance. He had qualified second at a 5:34, beat Larry Kamenson with that record run. Tom Hoover qualified 7th at a 5:49 and beat fellow Minnesotan Doc Holliday in his first round race. The crew checking through the side windows on that fiberglass-bodied Pontiac. The supercharger sticking up through the hood and windshield on Ed McCulloch's car. Underneath that body, a very sophisticated tubular chassis that contains one of those 4,000 horsepower nitromethane burning engines that have made Top Fuel and Funny Car so popular. McCulloch losing some traction. You see the smoke coming off the tires. Hoover has problems. McCulloch has the win. His elapsed time, 5:44, far off the 5:28 pace of round number 1. His speed, 260 miles an hour. Hoover had a bit of an advantage at the starting line, but his problems set in at about half track. He slowed to a 7:44. Here comes now the number 1 qualifier. This is the Castrol car of John Force. Arguably the most popular driver in drag racing today, and here's one of the reasons why: the long, smoky burnout by Force. The crowd just goes nuts. Force slowing to a stop at nearly half track. Got those tires just about as hot as you can get them without literally catching them on fire. Let's go down to the far end of the racetrack and Steve Evans.
Well, at the launch looked like another 5:28, but mid-track it smoked the tires big time.
Yeah, well, the thing went out there, it left. We thought it'd be a little bit softer that run, but it left, went out there, and it moved over, got out of the groove, and spun the tire.
So you had to drive it back to the center of the racetrack?
Yeah, really. It, it spun the tire pretty hard, but I don't know what run, but,
5:44.
That'll work.
Ed McCulloch obviously showing the strain of the Winston points battle. He is trailing the man back on the starting line, John Force, who's got to be looking skyward and saying, don't let it rain. It's continuing to mist, as it has all day long here at Brainerd International Raceway. But as you've heard the drivers refer to the racetrack, it's got lots of teeth. The wheelie bars behind Glenn Micros's car. This vehicle owned by Joe Pisano, the supplier of that JP1 nitro engine to many of the racers here. Micros qualified in the number 9 spot at a 5:56 and beat Casey Spurlock in an upset in round 1. Force, the number 1 qualifier, with a 5:33. Whit Bazemore, his first round victim. The 2 Oldsmobile-bodied funny cars approaching the starting line so gingerly, getting themselves set just right. Micros couldn't wait. He leaves the red light on the starting line and pops the supercharger. John Force lurching his way down track. Now he's smoking the tires. He obviously does not realize that Micros had red lighted, as Force stood on the throttle again and smoked the tires through in not a picture-perfect run, but certainly a crowd-pleasing one. John Force advancing to the final 4, but without the time that would give him lane choice. Let's watch this run again. Here's Micros. He left the starting line too soon. That red light disqualifying him. Force goes up in smoke. What a break for him. And to add injury to insult, Micros explodes a supercharger at half track. In the top fuel pit area, in Joe Amato's case, they know how important this next race is. It could be a turning point in the entire Winston Championship chase for the season. They're working, getting his car ready for the Final Four race with Gary Ormsby, the points leader. Now let's go down to the far end of the racetrack and Steve.
Obviously, John Force didn't know that Glenn Micros had red lighted, or you wouldn't have dirt tracked that funny car down here.
I tell you what, I told Coyle right before the run, I said, Coyle, when McCullough won, I said, this is when fate steps in. And I thought, God, how could I ever be that late? And I smoked the tires and it was over because he was trucking. And then I saw fire and I chased that baby down. What a break. Did I catch him? Oh, yeah, you counted him out. Boy, talk about it.
He was so busy driving, he didn't know that he passed him.
That was so much fun, I couldn't even believe it because he was rolling. That was a real great white knuckler there, buddy.
Dave, I'm done.
Steve, you were finished before you ever started with John Force. Back at Brainerd International Raceway in the Quaker State North Star Nationals, here is Jim White at the wheel of Roland Leong's Hawaiian Punch Dodge Daytona, backing up after his burnout. His competitor over in the far lane, the Cam 2 Milestone Pontiac, this is Tim Gross. While this is a late model body, the chassis on this race car was built back in 1984, but there is nothing antiquated about the performance of Tim Gross. He qualified number 5 with a 547, beating Al Hoffman in round 1. His competitor Jim White qualified 4th at a 539. He defeated Jerry Caminito in their first round matchup. As we have seen throughout eliminations thus far, the quicker car has selected the lane nearest the camera. A 5:44 in his first round race gave Jim White that choice. The 6:10 time for Gross put him wherever White wanted him. As Gary Ormsby said, he really doesn't think there's that much difference between the lanes, but in some cases kind of like follow the leader. Jim White out in front of Tim Gross to an easy victory. His elapsed time of 5:41 at a speed of 265 miles an hour. Gross having problems slows to a 6:30 at 173. This advances White into the Final Four. The last pair of funny cars getting set to go, and believe it or not, this is Bruce Larson. Sure, it says KC Hollywood Spurlock on the side of that Ford Probe, and at one time, this fiberglass body was KC Spurlock's funny car. But right now it is Bruce Larson's, and he is challenging Mark Oswald at the wheel of the Candies and Hughes Motorcraft Ford Probe. Oswald and his team seem to have solidified their performance. They qualified here number 3 with a 536, beating Mike Edstrom in round 1. And Bruce Larson took his Sentry Tack Engages Oldsmobile, as it is in normal condition, to the number 11 spot with a 562. Then on a subsequent run, he had problems. The engine let go and a ball of fire built up underneath the race car. The parachute burned off and Larson spun the car to stop it in a billowing cloud of smoke. Larson bailed out through the escape hatch in the roof and was unhurt.
Yeah, I feel real good. I don't think I got anything in my lungs. I'm not coughing and didn't really feel the heat. So I'm just thankful for all the good safety equipment on the car.
The safety equipment did its job for Bruce Larson, but the fiberglass body was destroyed, forcing the crew to work overnight, along with a lot of help from friends throughout the racing community, to mount the Ford body to the Oldsmobile setup. And now it is Bruce Larson, your reigning Winston champ, in competition in round number 2 against Mark Oswald, the most recent winner on the NHRA Winston Championship Trail. He took the title up at Seattle when he put away Ed McCulloch. Larson had a great run in round 1, beating Scott Coletta. He ran 5:33, but Mark Oswald ran 5:32 and picked his lane. And Oswald picked his way past Larson, a 5:36 to a losing 5:46. A great race here in the second round. Oswald at only 268 miles an hour, while Larson tried to catch him at 274. That moves Oswald against McCulloch, and Oswald picking the lane in the final four. The other pair, Jim White against the points leader John Force, and White has the lane choice. The Factory Hot Rods Pro Stock Eliminator coming up next at the Quaker State North Star Nationals. Back at the Quaker State North Star Nationals, the crowd looking on as they're warming the engine in Gary Ormsby's car. Ormsby in the cockpit, Lee Beard contemplating what's going on with that 4,000 horsepower engine. They're getting set for the Final Four race against Joe Amato, and we're in the Final Four of Pro Stock Eliminator. Here is the Oldsmobile out of AC Delco, driven by Warren Johnson. In the far lane will be the Super Shop Chevy Beretta. From the Rara and Morrison camp down in Arlington, Texas, Bruce Allen at the wheel. In earlier rounds of racing, Bruce Allen has been driving like a man possessed. In the second round, he beat Jerry Ekman with a 4:03 reaction time. That's only 0.03 of a second off of perfect. He qualified 7th at a 7:39 and beat Joe Lopone in the first round. Warren Johnson, meantime, qualified 3rd at a 7:36. He beat Luis Dayer and Bob Glidden in earlier rounds. And Allen is breaking the string of the racing we have seen today as he, the quicker car, has selected the far lane of the track. A tremendous race. And just by inches, Bruce Allen wins it. Again, it was his driving skill. A 7:34, his elapsed time at a speed of 185 miles an hour. Let's look again. Another near-perfect start by Allen, .407, only 0.07 of a second off the perfect 4:00. Warren Johnson had a 4:38, nothing to sneeze at. That's 0.31 of a second advantage at the starting line. As they ran their way down the racetrack, Johnson and the Oldsmobile kept closing, but could not make it. Here are the times. Look at the difference, only 0.02 of a second. When you add reaction time and elapsed time for total time, subtract them, that's the difference, and it's only inches at the end of the quarter mile.
You didn't have any idea who won that race?
No, not at all.
Your 7:34 was up to it.
That's great. That's a little bit better, too, 35 last time. That's great.
And you were racing the baddest guy in the place. You handled it.
He is bad, isn't he?
He just can't win a race.
Oh, he just is awesome. He just goes out there every race and runs good. Got to get my hat off that Oldsmobile car.
To the final goes the Beretta.
And Steve, this is the first time since the Super Nationals in March that Bruce Allen has been in the finals, and he did not win that event. Here now is Ricky Smith at the wheel of the STP Pontiac. He has run very well at this North Star Nationals, qualified 9th at a 7:40, beat Mark Powick and Lee Dean in previous rounds. His competition, Larry Morgan at the Castrol Oldsmobile wheel, qualified 5th with a 7:36, beating Harry Scribner and Jerry Haas in earlier competition. Morgan knows what an advantage off the starting line a whole shot can do for you. That's the way he won the Mile High Nationals up at Denver earlier this year, as he beat Warren Johnson. Now it is Smith in the far lane, Morgan in the near lane. A close race. And Morgan just pulls ahead at the finish line. The elapsed time, a 7:36. The losing time, a 7:37. And this was the case where power won out over driving skill. As we watch again, Ricky Smith gets a very slight advantage at the starting line. But by the time they make their way down to half track, it is an even race. And as they near the finish line, it was Larry Morgan pulling ahead. The difference in this race in total time, only 0.05 of a second. Here's how close it was. And that sets up the final round here at the Quaker State North Star Nationals. Morgan against Allen, with Bruce picking the lane. Now let's go to Steve with Larry Morgan.
Larry, you almost let that one get away.
That was close. I knew it would be. What can I say? How fast I run, that's all I'm concerned about.
Well, I happen to know, 7:36.
7:36. I lost lane choice, but that's all right. I'll be all right. I'll just have to drive like I did at Denver, right?
Absolutely. Better than he ever has in his career.
Larry Morgan knows how to win. He's taken 4 titles thus far this season. Top Fuel Final Four action coming up next, featuring this man, Dick LaHaye. As we get set for the Final Four in Top Fuel, let me just remind you that at the end of this race, we're going to be announcing the winner of the Goodyear Eagle Driver of the Race Award. And Goodyear will be giving $1,000 to SEMA, the scholarship fund of the Specialty Equipment Market Association, in that driver's name. You remember Frank Bradley started the string of record performances in the second round when he ran 5:02. That gave him lane choice over Dick LaHaye. But that moment of glory was expensive for Frank Bradley. He suffered enough engine damage they had to completely change the motor in his Top Fuel dragster to get it ready for this race with LaHaye. Both drivers into the pre-stage beams, indicating they're just a few inches away from the actual starting line. When the bottom lights are on, it's time to throw the switch, and it is up in smoke for LaHaye, and Frank Bradley goes through. Look at the time. 5:00. Just a few thousandths of a second away from a 4-second run, something that's never been done before here at Brainerd. But Frank Bradley regains low elapsed time of the meet. While Bradley is not in contention for the Winston Championship, those 50 points for the low elapsed time are right now in his pocket. And that's got to be on the minds of both Gary Ormsby, the leader, and the guy that's trying to catch him. He's in the lane next to him, Joe Amato. What a classic battle it is, the Valvoline Special of Amato racing against Gary Ormsby as they did in the Final Four just a couple of weeks ago at Seattle. In that match, Amato had engine problems. The supercharger let go. Ormsby went on to win the round and the race. Just before this round, Steve had a chance to talk with both the crew chiefs on these Top Fuel dragsters.
Lee, in Seattle, when Ormsby raced Amato, you said something interesting. The drivers are so even. This is a battle between myself and Tim Richards of the Amato camp.
Yeah, I think that's true. It's obvious that every time we race them, it's a big round for either myself or for Tim Richards. It's not a matter of who does what right. It's who makes a mistake. In Seattle, we both made mistakes. His was a little bit bigger than mine, and we ended up winning. We're going up here with everything we can to win. Hopefully, mine will be a little bit better than his.
Oh, yeah. Everything we do here is based on what we think Lee might do in this next race, and his track record is very good to this point. I mean, we need to win more of these races against him, and it's always a battle on my part against the other crew chief.
Tim Richards, a final check of the engine, rarely showing any emotion, points to the gauges and tells Joe Amato to take it to the starting line. On the far side of the track, Lee Beard going through the same procedures as the crews gather behind the race cars to watch the action. Amato, the quicker car the previous round, has selected the near lane. They're both staged. A tremendous start. And Amato from behind goes into the finals, and the first ever 4-second elapsed time has just been recorded at Brainerd International Raceway. A 4:99 at 278 miles an hour as Joe Amato and Tim Richards won that race. Gary Ormsby had a very slight advantage off the starting line. He parlayed that into a bigger lead by the time they had passed the 16th of a mile point. When they got to half track, he was still ahead. But then Amato came on like a freight train and recorded the first ever 4 at Brainerd and moved into the finals to race Bradley. Bradley, with a 5 flat, was certain he'd have the lane choice, but Amato outdid him.
Tell me about the race just now.
we had to put the Wayne tires on because its windshield's got raindrops on it. But I just wanted to make sure I was steady out there. I don't want to be dumb and get a red light. All right, guys. We staged up and I left it. I didn't want to look over and see where he was because I knew I couldn't see my peripheral vision. I just wanted to keep the car real straight and stay in the groove. And I did that, and I just looked over right when we got that finish line because I knew he wasn't in front of me, and he was right there. And I said, thank you, God.
All right. Final round bound.
Beat that green machine, huh, guys? First in the fours, huh?
Back at the Quaker State North Star Nationals, I'm Dave McClelland along with Steve Evans. And it may be cloudy and cool, but the action this weekend at Brainerd International Raceway has been incredibly hot. Let's take a look again on the qualifying run by John Force when the engine let go. Force thought it was all over, and then all of a sudden a ball of fire erupted out from underneath his Oldsmobile. The fire began to come into the cockpit as Force fought the car, burning off speed, trying to get it slowed so he could bring it to a stop. There was one thing on Force's mind, that was getting out of that inferno. The NHRA Safety Safari already was on the scene, pouring water on the Oldsmobile as it was rolling to a stop. Force came out of the emergency hatch and hit the ground hard. You know that he has got to be paying that price today. He's got to be stiff and sore as he is staging in the far lane to race Jim White in the Final Four here at the North Star Nationals. It was the run previous when Force lost traction against Glenn Micris that cost him a shot at lane choice. But it makes no difference. Force wins it. A lot of smoke out of the engine, but no fire this time. His elapsed time of 5:32 at 263 miles an hour. White faded to a 5:45 at 268. Force into the finals of the North Star Nationals. His competitor will come out of this next round of the Final Four. Ed McCulloch in the Oldsmobile-bodied car will be racing Mark Oswald, who has the lane choice. He has put McCulloch in the lane that Force just used to a 5:32. McCulloch must win here if he hopes to keep pace with the points leader, John Force. Steve?
Dave, John Force came out of the car, obviously in pain. NHRA's emergency people here. You okay, John?
No, that's a shoulder. When I fell out yesterday, and every time you hit the shoes, boy, it grabs you. They looked at it last night. There was nothing wrong. It's just bruised. We're fine.
John Force looking back towards the starting line. He's as interested as we are as to the outcome of this race. Will it be McCulloch or Oswald into the finals? This was the matchup of the final round at Seattle just 2 weeks ago, and there Oswald prevailed. But today, it is Ed McCulloch in a close race. McCulloch a 5:34 at 270 miles an hour. Oswald faster at 275, but a bit slower at a 5:37 elapsed time for Mark Oswald. Thus the final round, Ed McCulloch against John Force, and Force gets to pick his lane. The finals of the Quaker State North Star Nationals coming up next. John Force's victory in the Final Four was a costly one, a new engine being put between the frame rails. This has gone on with regularity in the John Force camp throughout this entire weekend. It'll be a battle of the two Winston points leaders, John Force and his closest rival, Ed McCulloch, in the final. Right now on the racetrack, the finalists in Pro Stock Eliminator. It is Bruce Allen with the lane choice and picking the lane that's been so good to him today, not only in reaction time, but also elapsed times. His competition, Larry Morgan. Both drivers completing their burnouts, and now it becomes a matter of procedure. Staging the car exactly where you want it. Getting the RPMs up high enough in those 500 cubic inch engines that are running on racing gasoline. They are limited to 2 4-barrel carburetors, and these race cars weigh 2,350 pounds with the drivers on board. Now the RPMs begin to come up as both drivers are in the beams. A great start. A close race to the finish line where Bruce Allen wins his second Quaker State North Star Nationals title in a row. Allen 7:37 at 185 miles an hour, and believe it or not, Allen again used a great start to win this race. He had an advantage off the starting line of 52 hundredths of a second over Larry Morgan. His winning time was a 7:37. Morgan ran 7:33, and as we see here in replay, almost caught the Chevrolet. Morgan's Oldsmobile, pulling a speed of 185 miles an hour, came oh so close, but it was Allen's day. Again, look at the difference. 12 thousandths of a second separated these two cars on that run. Now let's go to the far end of the racetrack. Steve Evans is with the champion.
Well, Bruce, I don't know what the Warren Morrison team are paying you, but it's time to renegotiate, I think. An incredible job. You're 37, beat Larry Morgan's 33. You've got 2 4.0 lights. You won this race.
Yeah, but it takes a fast car, too. I mean, just...
Take credit.
I know, but with just... Those were the 3 closest races I can remember. I raced Bob here last year, and it was close, but it takes a fast car, too. You can't do it by yourself, and those guys deserve a lot of credit, too.
Congratulations again.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
As Larry Morgan rumbles away, we get ready for our next pro final.
But Steve, before that, let's take a look at the point standings. As a result of today's action, Warren Johnson maintains his lead. Larry Morgan has moved into second, Jerry Ekman third, Bob Glidden is fourth, Darrell Alderman fifth, and Bruce Allen is number 8. There are 5 races remaining this season. Back at the starting line, Joe Amato getting his driving gear put on. His wife, Jerry, helping him out with the neck collar. Top Fuel coming up next. At the Quaker State North Star Nationals at Brainerd International Raceway, only one car has the engine running for the finals in Top Fuel Eliminator. That is Joe Amato, the man that ran 4.99 in the Final 4. He was to have raced this man, Frank Bradley, but Bradley suffered engine damage in his Final 4 victory over Dick LaHaye that kept him from the starting line in this championship round. Just moments ago, Steve found out why.
In Seattle, Frank Bradley had the performance to win, but couldn't make the call for the Final 4 because of stud problems with the block. In fact, it was this head stud right here that pulled completely out, and that cost him the chance to even race. Here at Brainerd, he again has had problems with studs in the block. He will not make the final against Joe Amato. This time it's at the bottom of the block. The stud, one of the studs that holds the main cap on, has broken completely off. Now, this is the broken main cap that forced the engine change after round number 2. So Frank Bradley has got to be extremely disappointed knowing he could win. Frank, how on earth do you keep your sense of humor? I see your guys around here just kind of shaking it off.
We've been doing this for a long time, Steve. You know that.
Your friends came to your aid and got you to the point where you were eligible for the final.
Yeah.
Can't you borrow something and make this work?
Yeah, we could, but, you know, I hate borrowing parts from somebody. And if you go out and destroy that, then you got to replace that. And it's...
you can't do it yourself. You don't want to do it.
That's right, yeah. We had blocks coming, but as you know, in Seattle, we had a similar problem. So we ordered 3 new blocks, and Joe was out of blocks with JP1, so he shipped us one in. And
well, I'm sure Joe Amato is smiling, and Gary Ormsby isn't. He was counting on you to take care of him.
Joe Amato is not only smiling, he is applauding himself as he comes up to the starting line. Frank Bradley is watching intently just to see what would he have had to do if he was going to beat Joe Amato. A great run thus far, and even quicker Joe Amato runs a 4.970 at 273 miles an hour. Tremendous performances out of Amato. Bradley over to shake hands with crew chief Tim Richards, the entire crew. A hug for Joe's wife, Jerry. He knows it would have taken one of his best runs ever to be competitive against the North Star Nationals champion. For the 5th time in the last 9 years, Joe Amato wins it all. The NHRA Racemaster giving the word to the crews for the funny car finals. Start them up. As the body comes down over Ed McCulloch, he is challenging the points leader, trying to gain on John Force. Now, let's go back to the far end of the racetrack. Steve's with Joe Amato.
497.
I've got a good team. You know, Team Valvoline, my Keystone, Key Parts, all the guys back at the warehouse. When I can go out and win a race like this, it's for all of them, you know. But it's, you know, my wife, my mother-in-law's home watching the dog. I mean, this is more fun. Trust me.
It's fun for us too, buddy.
To watch us, and we're going to make a points race out of this.
That's 2 in a row here.
It's 3 in a row. It's a hat trick. Yeah, we've won here 5 times now, I think, and since we started racing Top Fuel. I mean,
in a big Winston points jump for you.
Well, it puts us back in contention with Mr. Ornsby, and we want to make it exciting for the fans and let it go down to the end and really make it what racing's all about.
Absolutely. It's just going to get better and better. Joe Amato, the champion on this day at BIR.
Steve, he is making a race out of it as the Winston Points standings now find Joe Amato trailing Gary Ormsby by less than 300 points. In third is Dick LaHaye. Laurie Johns is fourth, and rounding out the top 5 is Gene Snow. The crew coming down to offer congratulations to Amato and a big hug for Tim Richards. Definitely. There's the man, as Joe says, that tuned him to the winner's circle yet once again. The crew chiefs in funny car just as important in Top Fuel. And just before this round, Steve had a chance to talk with both of them.
Well, in this constant crew chief versus crew chief battle, it's you against Bertie Federley, only you got a problem he didn't have.
Well, we've had a lot of trouble coming back from the fire we had yesterday that, of course, destroyed a bunch of the control systems as well as just the motor. And we've got it pretty close to being sorted out. But this last run, although we ran good enough to have lane choice in the final, one of the jets that we have open on the starting line that's supposed to close didn't. And, of course, that made the motor way too lean, and it just blacked the crankshaft, which is not too serious, but enough to where we got to change motors.
We feel real confident going into this final. I mean, they're we're giving them a lot of credit for their performance ability, but we think we can step this thing right up. So we're feeling real good about going into this final.
Austin Coyle, plagued with so many problems already this weekend, talks about adding another to the list, that of blacking the crankshaft. That's an overload, an overheating of the crankshaft journal, which makes it unusable until repairs are made. Now Force staging in the far lane, as is McCulloch in the near lane. Both taking their time. They're set. A tremendous start. And a close race. John Force wins it by just a couple of feet. The times of 5:38 at 269 miles an hour for the winner. McCulloch with the starting line advantage could not find the power. His losing time of 5:43. Look at the start. McCulloch had about 0.02 of a second advantage. Then as they got closer to half track, John Force continued to maintain his lead. But by the time they came to the finish line, McCulloch was trying to pull up alongside until he just ran out of racetrack.
Well, I'll tell you, after that fire yesterday and looking at this car, I've seen sicker dogs get well, but not very many, and not this well, John.
Well, I haven't got all the news. The sponsors, Castrol, Jolly Rancher, Oldsmobile, for giving us a great race car, Easy Wider, the Wax Shop. All these people are important. I did a good job driving the day. But what I want to say is, you guys come here. This is the hardest bunch of troopers I've ever had. We burnt the car up. We built the fuel tanks up. We did everything you could do to bring it back. A motor every round. And this is the best group, led by Austin Coyle, Bob Fisher, Butterfield, Harmson, Finn, and my newest, Stan Finn, my newest guy here, Morgan. And these guys are great because you know what? It was almost over down there. Everybody was beat. and I just didn't think they could hang on much longer. I was sleeping in the lounge. I got to tell you the truth. I was beat. You did a good job. I thank all of you guys.
You did too, man.
And winning has made almost all the pain go away in that shoulder, unless, of course, beating him on the back brings it back.
It's the pain in the checkbook that'll take a little while to heal after this.
They did leave a trail of smoldering parts here at Brainerd.
Steve, the old adage, winning is everything, best describes this moment. John Force with over 1,000-point lead over Ed McCulloch, heading for his first ever Winston title. Bruce Larson third, Mark Oswald fourth, Jim White number 5. In our opinion, the Goodyear Eagle driver of the race is definitely Bruce Allen. So Goodyear will be sending a check for $1,000 in his name to the scholarship fund of the Specialty Equipment Market Association. From a very good driver to a very good cause. For Steve Evans, I'm Dave McClellan saying so long. The 1990 NHRA Quaker State North Star Nationals has been brought to you by Budweiser, the king of beers. Remember, know when to say when. And by Autolite Spark Plugs, the only plugs guaranteed for 2 years, no matter how far you go. Coverage of the NHRA North Star Nationals has been a presentation of Diamond P Sports in association with ESPN.